This grew into a much bigger project than I ever anticipated. About a year and a half ago, I decided that I was going to prepare myself for the release of Kingdom Hearts 3 by buying the fancy new 1.5 plus 2.5 remix collection for the PS4, play through all the games, and write about each game as I went. Then, when I finished playing Kingdom Hearts 1 and sat down to write about it, I found that I had a lot more to say than I initially anticipated. In fact, I had 16,000 words worth of things to say, the most I'd ever written about any one piece of media, and I knew that things were only going to escalate from there. I kept playing through each game as planned and writing about them after I'd beaten them, and while life got in the way a few times, eventually I ended up with 125,439 words written about every single game in the series. I gained a lot of insight into these games during that process, and grew to appreciate them even more than I already did, as I actually discovered some really fascinating answers for why these games drew me in so much, and learned the ways in which they spoke to me, even before I fully understood what they were saying. And it all started here, with an essay that essentially served as a diary of my experience replaying Kingdom Hearts 1, written with no real insight into what these essays would eventually become. It's kind of fitting that this is exactly how I feel about Kingdom Hearts 1 when I look back on it now. The original Kingdom Hearts is such a simple game with a simple story, but the work it did to establish a compelling formula for its story and gameplay is what allows the games that follow it to spin out in some truly wild and interesting directions, without ever fully losing focus on what they are. There's no pretense whatsoever in this game to attempting to establish a formula for future entries though. Instead, Kingdom Hearts is simply trying to be the best game it can be, while attempting to execute on a seemingly ridiculous premise. What would happen if we made an anime-esque fanfiction about traveling to Disney World, wrapped it up in a unique action JRPG system, and threw in a bunch of Final Fantasy characters too, just for shits and giggles? And the most implausible thing about this premise is that it worked. And it worked like gangbusters. Like, sure, Kingdom Hearts has some issues, mechanics-wise and story-wise, but somehow, despite all of its issues, there is a genuine charm and sincerity to this game that makes it fun to play, often in spite of the very issues that bring it down. And I mean, while I won't disagree with anyone who says that most of the world's stories in this game are pale imitations of their film counterparts, there is a clear love for the source material and level of craftsmanship that elevates these scenes beyond their basic construction. And that love and care is what shines through once you're outside the moment of experience these less than stellar scenes themselves. Plus, historical context is incredibly important here. Kingdom Hearts, like Final Fantasy X, was one of Square Enix's first attempts at telling a fully 3D animated story that included voice acting for most major scenes. Kingdom Hearts did have an advantage over Final Fantasy X in that through their partnership with Disney, Square was granted a lot more access to Western voice talent, as well as most of the original cast members for the Disney films, who were happy to return to their roles. But this game was still made in an environment where most of the people working on it didn't have any experience telling a story like this, let alone directing actors and animating characters in the game's scenes. That makes what we see in Kingdom Hearts the AAA game equivalent to a student film, and an animated student film at that. And while it's fair to critique the game's animation, performance, cinematography, and writing, we also have the benefit of hindsight here, and can see that as the development team for Kingdom Hearts grew and matured, they addressed most of these issues and learned how to more effectively use their medium. Even as the game struggles to tell its story effectively in some parts though, it shines in others, most notably when it's focused on its original characters and stories, all of which are effectively established, developed, and told. It's not mind-blowing for the most part, but it is perfectly passable genre fiction that is willing to take some bold and risky turns when it needs to, mostly around the ending. We'll put a pin in that for now though, as we're going to get started by diving into the mechanics of this game, and what makes it play so well. The character we control, Sora, has a fairly limited moveset at the start of the game. He can jump, he can attack, and he can attack while jumping, and if he lands his attacks, he can get up to 3 consecutive attacks off as a combo with a finishing move that's a little more powerful than the rest of his attacks. There's also a menu on the screen that we control with the D-pad that allows us to select between normal attacks, items, magical spells, summons, and special attacks, the latter 3 becoming available later in the game. This is all perfectly fine and really kind of clever, and every major Kingdom Hearts game since has used this same design and made it feel good to control. The inclusion of a menu we're expected to navigate in the middle of combat can be overwhelming at times, but mostly it allows for a blend of real-time combat and deep RPG strategy that isn't available in many other games, and definitely isn't available the same way it is here. The controls aren't perfect though, and part of the problem is that when you get down to it, Sora can feel really bad to try and control. Part of this can be attributed to his attacks landing just a moment later than you might expect, though this is an intentional design decision to make combat more risky, and is something that you'll likely get used to over the course of the game. His jump is also both too high to easily get in aerial combos against short enemies, and too floaty to be used effectively in platforming, and his movement speed is very slow to start as well, which means that much of the combat early on is fruitlessly chasing highly mobile enemies that are usually just out of reach. Even worse, all of the issues with the game's controls are exacerbated by an in-game camera that is beyond unwieldy and nigh unusable in tight spaces, which the game has in abundance. This camera will often continue moving for up to 1/4 of a second after letting go of the right analog stick, and it seemingly has no rules in place for automatic adjustment when it crashes into parts of the environment, leaving it frequently jammed up against a wall right next to Sora. And that's not even mentioning the camera's issues while you're locked onto a target, as the camera will follow the target around the environment wherever it goes, whether that leaves the camera stuck at a terrible angle or not, an angle that you can't even adjust yourself without disabling the lock-on. I know it's difficult to design a good in-game camera, even Nintendo didn't get it right until the GameCube era, but these issues with the camera and controls make Kingdom Hearts feel unwieldy, clunky, and dated all throughout its opening hours. But, and this is a big but, most of the issues with the game's controls are addressed by the halfway point in the game through the use of abilities. High jump doubles your jump height and makes your jumps far easier to control, making air combos easier to pull off against most enemies since you have more air time to start your attack. Air and ground combo plus abilities make combat flow smoother as well, since you get to fit more hits into a single combo, and Combo Master, which makes it so even if you miss an attack, your attacks will still continue as if your combo hadn't been broken, smooths out any issues you might have with attacking even further. You also unlock the ability to dodge roll fairly early on in the game as well, which lets you roll at twice your walking speed and grants you a few frames of invincibility, making avoiding enemy attacks a lot easier and speeding up how quickly you can traverse through the world. None of these, unfortunately, address the issues with the game's camera, but they all make the actual act of fighting with Sora a lot easier and a lot more fun, as they slowly grant you more and more options for dealing with the enemies around you. Equipping these various abilities is the main mechanic that Kingdom Hearts combat is built around, and it's chock full of fun and interesting abilities for you to use in various ways. As you level up, you unlock these new abilities and can enable as many as you have the ability points or AP for, which you gain by leveling up, consuming rare items, or equipping AP boosting accessories. Some basic abilities are assigned to a different button, like the dodge roll and guard abilities, which both use the square button to activate. This could be unwieldy, but it's quite intuitive in practice since you only block while standing still and roll at all other times, which feels very natural and fluid. Other abilities are context sensitive and change what happens when you hit certain commands, like the counterattack ability, which temporarily replaces the attack command for a brief moment if an enemy blocks your attack, allowing you to instantly strike back at them. There's also the sliding dash ability, which makes it so that if you're locked onto an enemy that's a few feet away from you and press attack, rather than swinging the keyblade at nothing, Sora will slide towards the enemy you're locked onto and attack them as soon as he gets close. Even more fun are abilities like Ragnarok and Ars Arcanum, which are special attacks triggered by pressing the triangle button that allow you to quickly get a lot of powerful hits off on enemies at the cost of some mana, and usually deal a ton of damage. Kingdom Hearts is at its most fun when you're required to equip these abilities strategically and tailor them to best help you take down specific opponents. This strategizing and tailoring abilities to opponents and experimenting with what abilities would be most effective against certain bosses and encounters is incredibly deep. And managing your own abilities, your party members' abilities, what items you give to each party member, and how you configure your party members to attack, heal, and use special abilities are all extremely compelling mechanics that consistently challenged me up until my second trip to Bastion, the game's second to last world. Even in the face of less than stellar controls, once you adjust to them and unlock some of the key movement abilities, which you should get around level 15, Sora starts to feel pretty good to control, and level 15 is not that hard to reach, meaning fairly early on in the game, you have the tools to approach just about any fight in the game and emerge victorious, as long as you pay attention to the enemies you're fighting and their attack patterns. On that note, it's not just your abilities that make the combat in this game feel great. The enemy design for the game is absolutely phenomenal, and Square Enix gets a ton of mileage out of combining their multitude of unique enemies together in interesting ways. For the most part, the enemies you'll face in this game are known as the Heartless, dark creatures that emerge whenever someone gives in to the darkness present in their heart, and Kingdom Hearts makes the absolute best of this concept by using this as an excuse to make a ton of colorful, unique, and energetic enemies whose designs are based on the worlds that they hail from. As you explore the world of this game, you're slowly introduced to new enemies, having to learn how they fight and how best to fight against them. And by the time you reach the end of the game, the level designers can pull out unique combinations of these enemies in order to challenge you in new ways, as you have to assess the best way to counter each of their unique abilities and movements in order to take them all out as quickly as possible. This never gets old. And even when you're around level 100 and can take out most of the enemies in a single hit, the movement patterns of each enemy are unique enough that you have to account for it if you want to take them out quickly. About the only real complaint you could lodge against the enemy design in this game is that some of the enemies you fight end up feeling a bit too similar, like all the jungle-themed Power Wilds and their variants, or the magical Nocturnes who all have different elemental magic abilities. But while these enemies aren't particularly unique on their own, their inclusion in a group of larger, more powerful enemies will often throw interesting wrinkles into what the best approach to a combat situation is, forcing you to adapt to their presence on the fly if you don't know they'll be lumped in with these powerful enemies beforehand. This is most present in Olympus Coliseum's cups and tournaments, which pit you against wave after wave of Heartless, ending with a boss that's either a powerful Heartless or a Final Fantasy character. While this is all technically optional content, since you don't need to complete it to finish the story, it is easily one of the best and most memorable worlds of the game, as the tournaments you fight in are expertly designed, providing just the right level of challenge as you are pitted against as many interesting waves of enemies as the designers could think of. I'd even be willing to wager that this world and its tournaments are what stick out as the most fun part of this game to everyone who played it. It certainly was the most memorable part of the game for me, and before replaying it recently, I honestly didn't remember much from Kingdom Hearts 1 at all, but still remembered how much fun pushing my way through the tournaments and hidden optional bosses was. And, while we're on the subject of design, this is as good a time as any to mention just how well this game's graphics still hold up. A lot of that has to do with art style, of course. The design of everything unique to this game still looks like nothing you've seen in any other game, thanks to the incredible art direction by Takayuki Odachi and the concept design by the game's director, Tetsuya Nomura. But there are little touches to the texture and model design that show a master over the PlayStation 2's hardware as early as 2002. That's not to say that this game looks perfect. Some of the animations, especially the facial animations, look awkward, and the game puts the static in-game facial models onto the characters a bit too often in cutscenes. But even with all that in mind, there still isn't a single asset in this game that looks bad, even on close inspection. The game still looks damn good, and I would be hard-pressed to find a game from this era besides The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker that comes close to looking as good as Kingdom Hearts does. One of the things that surprised me the most when revisiting Kingdom Hearts was just how simple and straightforward the story was. If you're not familiar with it already, the game series has garnered a reputation of convoluted, overly complicated storytelling. A reputation that is, for the most part, pretty unfair, but almost none of what makes this series truly unwieldy is found in this game. At its core, Kingdom Hearts is the story of a young boy going on a quest to find his lost friends, and the challenges he faces along the way. The game opens with Sora, our main character, questioning the existence of reality as he falls deep into a watery darkness, and suddenly finds himself on a beach, staring out as a massive wave rolls towards his best friend, Riku. Riku stretches his hand out towards Sora just before they are both overtaken by the wave, and Sora tries to swim towards Riku, only to be pushed away by the tide. We see Sora starting to drown in this water, but he eventually floats back up, gasping for air at the surface. Able to breathe again, Sora makes his way towards his other best friend, Kairi, who is also standing on the beach waving at him. But once he reaches her, she points up to the sky at a meteor shower, and when we get closer, we see alongside these meteors is Sora, asleep and falling back down into the deep water. The two Soras merge, falling down underneath the water as Kairi reaches out towards him, and eventually, Sora falls down to the bottom of this dark sea, where it is revealed that he is standing on a stained glass image of Snow White. This opening is similar to your typical anime opening, pop song and all, but is unique in its use of abstract imagery to foreshadow future events, tying water and darkness together to show the arcs Riku and Sora will both have over the course of the game, as Riku embraces the darkness and Sora attempts to rescue him from it, only to become lost in a far deeper darkness himself. The dreamlike nature of this opening also echoes the signature style of Satoshi Kon, and we'll also see as we go along how Kingdom Hearts wears his, as well as all of its other influences, on its sleeve. The only critique I have of this opening is that Simple and Clean's lyrics don't exactly tie well into the themes of the game, and the remix of Simple and Clean used in the opening sounds like garbage. But I hate any song with stereotypical early 2000s club music, so I'm a little biased, but that's just me. After this opening, we finally gain control of Sora as we walk along stained glass Disney princesses surrounded by complete and utter darkness. A mysterious, completely silent voice guides us through this area, slowly teaching us the controls of the game while teaching Sora of his ultimate destiny as the one who will open the door. What this means will actually remain an open question throughout most of the game, but before we have time to try and discern what it means, the voice introduces Sora to the Heartless in their most iconic form, little shadows that can be two-dimensional on the ground in order to avoid danger. Sora is forced to face off against an incarnation of the darkness inside his own heart, only to fail and awaken from all of this as he has been sleeping soundly on the beach this entire time. This opening sequence is mysterious and awe-inspiring, thanks to the brilliant art design on display, as well as the quiet, instantly memorable score by Yoko Shimomura, and how effectively it sets the tone and expectations for the rest of the game cannot be understated. Kingdom Hearts eventually takes a turn for the existential and philosophical, and thanks to this intro, that turn doesn't feel like a shift, but a natural development of the ideas introduced here. Once Sora's awake, the game starts properly introducing us to his friends. There's Kairi, a young red-headed girl about Sora's age, and also Riku, a white-haired boy a year or two older than Sora. These three are pretty clearly a tight-knit friend group, though there is a little rivalry between Sora and Riku, both romantically over a desire to be close to Kairi, and in that way all young boys are rivals with each other, which gives the three an interesting, though not entirely unique, dynamic. The trio has the goal of leaving Destiny Islands, their home, together in search of new worlds, and they are building a raft and collecting supplies for that journey, which is fast approaching. While most of what we do on the islands is simple, fetch quest gameplay, the game is also working to expand upon these three characters and their relationships, and it does a solid job of doing so. Sora is a somewhat immature, but overall very kind-hearted kid, and he clearly cares for both Riku and Kairi deeply, even if he can easily be baited by Riku into feeling like he needs to compete for Kairi's affections. Kairi herself is loud, brash, and excitable, and she is the one most determined to get out and see other worlds, having originally come from another world herself. Riku, then, is the odd man out of the group, partially because Sora and Kairi are closer to each other than they are with him, and partially because of the small but significant age and maturity gap between him and his friends. The time we spend with these characters is about as low stakes as it gets, which is a very good thing. Even as we hunt down rafting supplies, what we're seeing is just a bunch of friends hanging out on the beach all day, away from their parents, dreaming about exploring the world. This peaceful time on the beach can't last forever though, and we get a brief glimpse into what will shake up this trio's world when Sora enters a mysterious cave and is confronted by a cloaked figure who tells Sora that his world has been tied to the darkness. This figure is voiced by Billy Zane, who does an incredible job of immediately casting a menacing image through his performance, and he is a standout in this game's cast, managing to capture a perfect picture of a man too lost in his own curiosity for his own and the world's own good.
This world has been connected, tied to the darkness. You do not yet know what lies beyond the door. There is so very much to learn. You understand so little. One who knows nothing can understand nothing.
With that danger created, we continue along our fetch quest to gather the last supplies for the trio's journey, and Sora, Kairi, and Riku all go home and turn in for the night. We've also been getting some brief scenes of Donald and Goofy, who have discovered that King Mickey has gone missing from Disney Castle. They found a letter from him saying that he's gone off to other worlds to investigate why so many worlds are disappearing, which is visible in the sky as a star blinking out of existence. These scenes are some of the better Disney character-focused scenes in the game, as the game developers seem to have been very intent on getting the comedy and playfulness of Donald and Goofy right. But even with their funny moments, there are basic mistakes like shots lingering for just a second too long, stilted animations, and models that appear eerily still. Just before Sora is called down for dinner by his mother, he notices that a storm is brewing in the distance and jumps out of his bed and heads out to the beach to make sure that the raft isn't lost to the storm. As he makes his way around the island, he is surrounded by shadows, who are completely immune to the practice sword that Sora carries, and Sora runs to find Riku, who tells Sora that the door is about to open, just before being swallowed up by darkness emerging from his feet, which envelops him and Sora. Riku's embrace of the darkness this early in the story comes a bit suddenly, but we can see hints of his fall planted in the competitiveness he shows towards Sora. It's established pretty clearly that Riku and Sora are always having little competitions with each other, whether it be racing around the island or dueling each other with wooden swords. But on the second day, Riku challenges Sora to a race, making a bet with him that the winner will get to share a Paupu fruit with Kairi. It's already been established that Sora wants to share a Paupu with Kairi, and that the kids on this island have a belief that the two people sharing a Paupu will have their fates intertwined. So, in making this bet with Sora, Riku is attempting to forcibly take away Sora's connection with Kairi by proving he is better and more deserving of her than him. This same kind of overzealousness is also likely why, just before the night of the storm, Kairi asks Sora to get on the raft and sail away without Riku, having sensed a shift in Riku's feelings and intentions towards her. This is all very, very subtle subtext, and it's not exactly delivered with the most competency, but it is all still present and does a very interesting thing in connecting the darkness and Riku's descent into it to performative toxic masculinity, in addition to what Riku states outright, that he is embracing the darkness because he believes it is the only way to realize his obsession with visiting other worlds. A sudden burst of light frees Sora from the darkness though, and suddenly a giant key appears in his hands, which he instinctually recognizes as the Keyblade. Riku is nowhere to be found, so Sora returns to the mysterious cave in search of Kairi, the last place on the island he can look. He does find Kairi in the cave, but before they have a moment to speak, a sudden burst of wind causes Kairi to fly through Sora, and Sora to fly out of the cave onto the floating remains of the island. On these remains, a dark side Heartless towers over Sora, and even after he manages to defeat it, he and his islands are all drawn up together into a swirling orb of darkness, and Donald and Goofy look up into the sky and worry at the sight of another star going out.
Oh, look! A star's going out! Come on, let's hurry!
Sora wakes up to find himself in Traverse Town, a world that has become a refuge for those whose worlds have otherwise been destroyed or taken over by the Heartless. After exploring the town and discovering that the Heartless are here as well, Sora meets Leon from Final Fantasy VIII, who challenges him to a fight over his Keyblade, and, in my first playthrough, proceeded to thoroughly whoop Sora's ass. Sora then wakes up in a hotel room with Yuffie from Final Fantasy VII and Leon, who teach Sora about the Heartless, how they're born when a person's heart falls to darkness, how the Keyblade is bound to him, and that the Keyblade will always attract the Heartless, who want to consume Sora's heart. And meanwhile, Aerith from Final Fantasy VII is explaining these same things to Donald and Goofy in the room next door. Then, after explaining to Sora in great detail just how dangerous his life will be from now on, Leon and Yuffie proceed to abandon him entirely, leaving Sora with only a little advice that he needs to hunt down the leader of the Heartless to keep himself safe. This is pretty funny and jarring on its own, and it was even funnier for me initially, because I proceeded to die to the Heartless directly outside the hotel over and over and over again before finally getting the hang of how to fight them. It was actually kind of frustrating at the time, but looking back, it's just really fucking funny. Like, come on, Leon, this is the 13-year-old kid. Don't just leave him alone. No, he's a precious boy. Why? Anyway, eventually, we get Sora to stumble into the boss guard armor, as well as Donald and Goofy, who join Sora in the fight and proceed to contribute nothing of value, since we haven't had the chance to customize them yet, leaving us to fight guard armor on our own and die about 15 more times. God. This game is really funny when you take all of Sora's deaths into account. Anyway, after defeating guard armor together with Donald and Goofy and discovering the power of teamwork, Donald and Goofy recruit Sora to join them, promising to help him find Riku and Kairi as long as he helps them find King Mickey. They trust Sora so quickly and easily because they're Donald and Goofy, they're trusting. But they were also instructed to find the person who has the key by Mickey, and Sora has a Keyblade, and yeah, you get the picture, moving on. The next stop after teaming up with Donald and Goofy is Wonderland, a world based on Disney's adaptation of Lewis and Carroll's Alice in Wonderland, and one of the absolute best worlds in the game. Rather than hewing to the original film's story and making Alice the protagonist, the game opts to put Sora in that role, making him the confused newcomer exploring this strange world for the first time, drinking shrinking and growing tonics, and facing down the Queen of Hearts in court. We learn early on that Alice has been imprisoned by the Queen of Hearts, who is accusing her of trying to steal her heart, and because Sora is a good kid who wants to help others, we're tasked with collecting evidence to prove Alice's innocence. This is admittedly a little fetch questy at first glance, but it actually ends up being a lot of fun, since the fetch quest is just an excuse to explore the unique world and discover all its strangeness. The best example of this is when we finally get to fully explore the Bazaar Room, which has sideways and upside down versions of itself, and have to interact with the room from all angles to access all the hidden areas of the world. With a bit of legwork, we prove Alice's innocence and the Heartless's guilt, but the Queen calls for Sora and Alice's execution anyway, and we have to defeat her guards and destroy her prison in order to try and free Alice. Alice is nowhere to be found after destroying the prison though, presumably having been taken by the Heartless, though it's not made clear why. After running around the forest of Wonderland, we encounter the Cheshire Cat, who gives us cryptic hints about what we need to do to keep Wonderland safe from the Heartless, and following his instructions eventually leads us into a fight with Trickmaster, a jester-like Heartless that wields 2 flaming juggling sticks as a weapon. His height requires mastering quick aerial combos, since that's the only way to actually hit him, and learning how to effectively dodge his attacks to stay on the offensive at all times is a lot of fun. Once Trickmaster is defeated, the iconic talking door from the original film wakes up from a deep sleep and reveals to Sora that there is a keyhole on the inside of his mouth, which Sora is able to seal with his Keyblade. Each one of these worlds has keyholes, as it turns out, and later on we'll learn why it's important to seal them. This world works pretty well overall, as involving Sora in a mystery story that just happens to include these Disney characters frees up the game designers to play to their strengths, since the Disney aspects don't get in the way of exploration and combat or wear out their welcome in the more limited cutscenes. There are 2 worlds that we can visit next, Deep Jungle and Olympus Coliseum. And Olympus Coliseum is definitely the most fun out of the 2, though a lot of that fun doesn't come until later in the game, since most of the fun in that world is playing through the tournaments. Outside of those tournaments though, I'm not sure what, if any, comment the story for this world deserves. It's not like bad or anything, or any worse than any other world, but it doesn't really add much to the game at all. Or at least, that's the thing, it doesn't add much to this game. But what's established in this world here becomes key to how Olympus Coliseum is used down the road, so it is kinda important to at least go over the story. Sora, Donald, and Goofy all arrive at the Coliseum and meet Philoctetes, who is busy preparing for the next tournament, which Sora immediately wants to enter. Phil puts Sora through some training, which he proves competent at, but he still doesn't let him compete, since he doesn't have an invitation. Though that's quickly remedied by a quick visit from Hades, who gives Sora a ticket as a ploy to defeat him and steal his Keyblade. After entering the preliminaries and making it to the final round, Sora has to face Cloud, who was working for Hades and has been ordered to kill Sora and Hercules. Cloud Strife, Soldier First Class, is no match for an untrained 13-year-old boy though. And after being defeated, Hades takes matters into his own hands, sending Cerberus into the ring to take out everyone. Hercules is there to hold off Cerberus, giving Sora time to escape, but he decides to head back into the fray, not wanting to leave Hercules to fend off Cerberus and protect Cloud alone. Sora successfully takes down Cerberus, giving Hercules and Cloud a chance to escape, and after this victory is named a junior hero by Phil, alongside Donald and Goofy, and Phil lets them know that they'll be allowed to compete in any future tournaments from here on out. As the trio leaves, Hercules whispers to Phil that Sora only beat Cerberus because he wore him down first, but they both agree not to tell Sora since they don't want to bring down his confidence.
I still can't believe that squirt actually beat Cerberus.
Just between us, I'd already worn Cerberus down by the time the little guy jumped in.
My lips are sealed.
And that's it. That's the full extent of the story for Olympus Coliseum. And it's good. It's perfectly acceptable storytelling with a solid beginning, middle, and end. And it shows Sora proving himself to Phil and Phil coming around on Sora. There's nothing wrong with that, but there's no real meat to the story here, or deeper themes to dive into, as the only question posed in this world, what does it mean to be a true hero, is posed so superficially and left so unexplored that it's functionally meaningless. Deep Jungle, though, has a lot more going on, even if there's not nearly as much fun to be had here as there is in the Coliseum. This world is based on Disney's adaptation of Tarzan, which, while a solid film in its own right, isn't really the kind of story where making Tarzan a side character works, and that's what they do here. After Sora and Donald crash land their gummy ship due to a petty, childish fight that I hate so much because the fight adds nothing to the story, it's just kind of meaningless conflict inserted for basically no reason. It's bad. It's bad writing, and thankfully, it's something that Kingdom Hearts learns to avoid and actively works to subvert. Anyway, We pick up in the middle of Tarzan's story after he's met Jane and Clayton, as he jumps in to save Sora from Sabor. Sora is feeling pretty down after his fight with Donald, leading him to actively decide not to try and find Donald or Goofy, instead asking Tarzan to help him search for Riku and Kairi, who Tarzan seems to know how to find. We do some fetch questing for some slides that help Tarzan communicate a little more clearly, are reunited with Donald and Goofy, though Donald and Sora are both still upset about their fight, and finally get Tarzan to agree to introduce Jane and Clayton to his ape family. This goes horribly wrong, all because Clayton only wants to hunt and kill the gorillas, leading to a close call where Clayton pretends he isn't meaning to fire a loaded shotgun at innocent apes, and is only stopped at the last minute by Donald.
What's the big idea?
Wait, Kerchak, please.
You don't understand. A snake slithered by. You see, I saved that poor gorilla's life.
With Sora, Donald, and Goofy all there to explain what happened, Jane confronts Clayton and kicks him out of the group for betraying her trust. Though, hunting gorillas was something Clayton bragged about coming here to do, so it's not really much of a betrayal. This story is contrived and ridiculous in the worst way, and it's not helped by the recast actors for Tarzan, who all sound bored and entirely disinterested in their performances.
Clayton?
Not Clayton. Not Clayton.
There's not even any saving graces for this world and its design either. Deep Jungle is a labyrinth that is easy to get lost in, and the game does a very poor job of communicating where you need to go, which often led to me running around the entire map just hoping for a cutscene to play and tell me I went to the right place. The enemy design is thankfully still solid. The final boss is exciting, tense, and genuinely fun without ever feeling brutal. After rescuing a bunch of gorillas around the jungle, we finally face off against Clayton and a giant invisible heartless called the Stealth Sneak, whose combined marksmanship and mobility force you to determine the bigger threat and prioritize them accordingly. Once this fight is over, Tarzan, with the blessing of the apes, shows Sora a series of caverns behind a large waterfall, which is where the world's keyhole is located. After Sora seals the keyhole, Tarzan clarifies what he meant earlier when he told Sora that he knew where his friends were. They were in his heart all along.
Means heart. Friends in our hearts.
Heart.
Oh, so that's what it meant.
Sora is understandably disappointed, having believed that Tarzan could actually help him find Riku and Kairi, but he resigns himself to searching alongside Donald and Goofy, and finally, he and Donald actually make up after their ridiculously childish and contrived fight.
Sorry about what I said.
I'm sorry too.
Yeah, all for one, huh?
At this point in the game, we return to Traverse Town, mostly to advance a plot about gummy routes, which unlocks us new worlds, and, that could be boring, but that time is also spent introducing Sora to Final Fantasy VII Sid, who helps Sora and his friend outfit their gummy ship with new tech, and takes up a role as Sora's mentor figure. The Kingdom Hearts decided that Final Fantasy VII Sid would be the best character to use as a mentor figure is interesting, to say the least, but this game makes enough changes to Sid's character to make it work, and having at least one adult in the game express genuine concern for Sora's safety is really nice. The most important bits of story we get on this return visit are related to Riku though, as Sora unexpectedly runs into him in Traverse Town's 3rd district. We as the audience have seen a little of what Riku has been up to so far, and he's been working with Maleficent and the Council of Disney Villains, albeit reluctantly, since he's only interested in using them to help find and protect Kairi. When he's reunited with Sora though, we see his expectations for their reunion quickly shattered, as he finds that Sora has new friends and is able to fend off the Heartless capably on his own. He disappears without even saying goodbye to Sora, and not long after, Maleficent arrives to continue pulling his strings, telling him exactly what hurts him the most. Sora doesn't care about him, and has replaced him with Donald and Goofy.
You see, it's just as I told you. While you toiled away trying to find your dear friend, he quite simply replaced you with some new companions. Evidently, now he values them far more than he does you. You're better off without that wretched boy. Now think no more of him and come with me. I'll help you find what you're searching for.
With these seeds planted in Riku's heart, he's ready to fall deeper into the darkness, and deeper under Maleficent's control, all because of his own insecurity about not being Sora's only friend. The next world that we visit is Agrabah from Aladdin, and this world is interesting, as half of it is spent combining the bare-bones plot of the original film with the overarching nefarious plot that we've seen glimpses of so far, which mostly works out pretty well. But the other half of the world is spent attempting to emulate the most iconic aspect of the original film, the genie. And it all falls flat on its face due to a combination of bad animation, terrible writing, and casting Dan Castellaneta as the genie. Now, in fairness, I do understand that the developers probably didn't have much choice but to go with Castellaneta, and it's not his fault he's given some genuinely awful material to try and work with. But even with all of that in mind, Robin Williams' brilliance as a comedian is what made the genie the beloved character he is today. And without his talent for improvisation, the genie just comes off as a loud, obnoxious, childish gag character, whose sole purpose is to throw out bad punchlines like he's doing a stand-up routine for 3-year-olds. It doesn't help that the animation and camera work surrounding Genie is some of the most ridiculous nonsense you see in the game. Genie moves like a 4-year-old hopped up on sugar and coffee and almost talks like it too, with his entire shtick being reduced to rapid-fire, non-specific game show host references and banter, as the camera darts around him constantly like it can't keep up. This all combined is incredibly overbearing and tiresome, made worse by the fact that it reduces one of the most lovable characters in the Disney canon to the equivalent of that one annoying kid in your family who hasn't learned how to stop talking and listen to the people around them, even though they're already like 12 years old and should have learned better by now.
Any 3 wishes! Oh, 1 wish, a 2 wish, a 3 wish. Then I make like a banana and spin it. Whoa! Money, royalty, fame! Why didn't I think of that? Go, just say the word and I'll deliver it in 30 minutes or less, or your meal's free! Hey, I'll even throw in a cappuccino.
Another place where Agrabah fares poorly is in its depiction of Aladdin freeing Genie with his final wish. Unlike in the original film, there is no character arc that Aladdin has to go through to recognize that the best use for his last wish is to grant his friend his freedom. Aladdin proposing this idea in the original film serves to reinforce that for all of his thievery, he's still a kind and caring person, and the Aladdin we see freeing Genie from a lamp at the end of the film is a far cry from the Aladdin who tricked Genie into granting him a free wish at the beginning. Watching Aladdin unlearn his conniving, selfish ways and accept sincerity and selflessness as a way of life is what makes him freeing Genie at the end moving, as it's the natural conclusion to his character arc. And what Kingdom Hearts does with this story thread is disappointing, to say the least. First off, Aladdin in this story only uses his wishes to get himself or others out of danger. He never tricks Genie out of a wish, and he never wishes to become Prince Ali, instead focusing his wishes on being there to save Jasmine. So since he's already pretty selfless from the start, there's no big payoff in him wishing for the Genie's freedom. And it's even less rewarding than it could be, as the alternative for Aladdin's last wish would be for him to wish for Jasmine to be poofed safely back to Agrabah. Arguably just as selfish a wish as wishing for Genie's freedom. Wishing for this would break the plot, of course, so I'm not arguing that he should have wished for that instead, but it's such an unfortunate departure from the original film, where Aladdin's option for a final wish is to be selfish and become a prince again, instead of keeping his promise to his friend, who, tragically, seems to expect to be disappointed by Al. Thankfully, what does work about this world is Sora and Aladdin teaming up to stop Jafar from kidnapping Princess Jasmine and letting Heartless into the world's keyhole, which we discover here is how Destiny Islands and the other disappearing worlds have been destroyed. This world is where the game's plot actually starts to genuinely pick up, giving us encounters with the secretive council of Disney villains and hinting at their plans to capture the Princesses of Heart. It's pretty simple overall, but it feels nice for the story to actually be in motion, as up until now, we've only seen shadowy glimpses of the villains, and have yet to encounter anyone other than Hades, who seems to have broken off from the rest of the pack early on. Once Jafar is defeated, in a sadly disappointing couple of boss fights, as much as I love getting to punch a character voiced by Gilbert Gottfried in the face, it gets old pretty fast, we seal the keyhole and move on to the next world. The next world that we get to visit is Monstro, the giant whale that Pinocchio was swallowed by in Disney's Pinocchio. And this is just a genuinely great world. The different chambers of Monstro's insides are all arranged in a labyrinth that loops back on itself in clever ways. There are a large variety of enemies for you to fight, and the story here is superb, with Sora's main goal being to get Pinocchio safely back to Geppetto, who was trapped here inside the whale with him. The danger that Pinocchio is put in is brought on both by his own precociousness and curiosity, and by the dark influence that Riku is exerting over him. By this point, Riku has dived headlong into the darkness and fully embraced Maleficent's lie that Sora has replaced him, even though we've seen very clearly that Sora still cares a lot about Riku. Sora never gets the chance to explain this to Riku though, and Riku is so far gone that he is willingly putting a young child in danger, just to try and push Sora to the edge. This all culminates in a final boss battle with a giant Heartless that has imprisoned Pinocchio inside its stomach, in which we finally free Pinocchio and are able to return him safely to Geppetto. Before we can even speak to Riku though, he disappears into the darkness, and we don't get to see him again for a while, leaving Sora unable to bridge the distance that has grown between them.
How about it, Sora? Let's join forces to save her. We can do it together. What? You'd rather fight me? Over a puppet that has no heart?
Heart or no heart, at least he still has a conscience.
After this, we have the option of visiting either Halloweentown or Atlantica, and, okay. We'll get Atlantica out of the way, because Goddess Grace, Atlantica is just kind of awful, and not very fun at all. See, for some reason, the developers of Kingdom Hearts decided to make a world where Sora, Donald, and Goofy are all turned into mer creatures and have to swim around a world completely covered in water, repurposing the square and circle buttons on the controller to adjust your height in the water at will. And they really must love The Little Mermaid because great goddess, these controls are clunky and unintuitive. Managing Sora's height in this way is incredibly imprecise, and to make it worse, you also lose the ability to use any of the special abilities you've relied upon at this point to make combat smooth and enjoyable. It doesn't help that this is the second most Heartless infested world in the game, so any exploration requires a lot of combat if you don't want enemies surrounding you and attacking you constantly. This is kind of a shame too, because Atlantica is probably the world where the original Disney story of The Little Mermaid is most effectively combined with the story of Kingdom Hearts. The story still follows a young, curious girl named Ariel, who is forced to abandon her interest by her abusive as fuck father. I hate Triton. He makes me angry. He is so abusive. But rather than desiring to be human, Ariel wants to explore other worlds, as well as help Sora and his friends seal the keyhole. Now, up until this point, Sora, Donald, and Goofy have been careful not to tell anyone that they're from another world, based on a prime directive of sorts that prevents meddling in the other world's affairs, even though they've done plenty of meddling so far and it hasn't seemed to cause any problems. But Ariel's father, Triton, intuits that our heroes are from another world based on the way that they swim, and that Sora must be the key bearer if he's from another world.
Young man, you're not from another ocean. You're from another world, aren't you?
Huh?
Then you must be the key bearer.
How did you know?
You may fool Ariel, but you can't fool me. You don't know your dorsal fin from your tail. As the key bearer, you must already know one must not meddle in the affairs of other worlds.
He claims that the key bearer only brings chaos and destruction to worlds, and uses this as an excuse to lash out at Ariel, destroying a silver trident she helps Sora recover, and committing emotional violence against his own daughter.
Ariel, you've disobeyed me again. I told you not to leave the palace.
Daddy, no! How could you?
What follows in Atlantica is fairly predictable if you've seen the original film. Ariel runs away from her abuser and into the clutches of Ursula, who promises to grant her wish of visiting other worlds if she can deliver Triton's golden trident to her. Ariel does as Ursula commands, Ursula turns on her, and we must fight Ursula twice to save Atlantica. The first boss fight against Ursula is in a standard-sized battle arena, where she uses magic to evade you, and the final boss fight against her is in a massive open space after Ursula harnesses the full power of the trident to grow to a massive size. These boss fights are alright, but they're hampered greatly by how awful the undersea combat is, and how uncomplicated Ursula's attack patterns are, especially in her giant form. But at the same time, all I wanna do is see Ursula turn into a giant woman, a giant woman. All I wanna be is Sora who gets to see a giant woman. All I wanna do is help Ursula turn into a giant woman, a giant woman. All I wanna be is Sora who gets to see a giant woman. Oh, I know it'll be great, and I just
just can't wait to see a big woman with a trident. She can conquer your home and take the throne because she is a giant woman. You might even like being her servant, and if you don't, well, you deserve it. But if it were me, I want Ursula to be a giant woman, a giant woman. All I want to do is see Ursula turn into a giant woman. 'Cause giant women are hot.
After Ursula has been defeated and we've recovered Triton's golden trident, he apologizes to his daughter for being an abusive asshole, even if his apology is made mute by how little he changes towards Ariel, and entrusts her with his trident to reveal Atlantica's keyhole, trusting her and Sora to seal it shut. This is overall a pretty functional and well-told story that does a good job of capturing the original Disney characters, in no small part due to Jodie Benson's fantastic reprisal of her role as Ariel. The small hint of the greater story behind the Keyblade is also really interesting, as it throws some potential ambiguity into Sora's role. Another thing worth noting is how Triton's abuse plays into a subtle theme of showing how biological family isn't as important as the friendships we make, or a chosen family. We get some minor hints of this in how Sora, Riku, and Kairi's parents are all ignored after Destiny Islands, as well as from the highly dysfunctional sibling relationship of Lock, Stock, and Barrel in Halloweentown later on. And the only good family relationship we see is between Pinocchio and Geppetto, who would be a stretch to call biological family. Even if we did accept that they're biological family though, Geppetto was not the one who ventures into the whale to rescue Pinocchio. That job is reserved for his friends Sora, Donald, and Goofy. This all ties back into Atlantica's story pretty clearly, as while Sora and his friends lie to Ariel about where they are from, they're still most interested in finding the keyhole to keep Atlantica safe from the Heartless. Triton doesn't trust his daughter though, or her judgment of her friends, and when she helps them against his wishes, he destroys what they found together out of fear, an action that drives Ariel to Ursula. Ariel and Sora can only gain Triton's trust by defeating Ursula after things have already gone wrong, and when Triton does finally tell Sora where the keyhole is located, on the condition that they seal it, Goofy points out that his mistrust was unfounded, saying, "Sealing the keyhole is what we were planning to do from the beginning." From this, we can see that Ariel's familial relationship was ultimately quite harmful to her, and if Triton had just trusted his daughter, all of the conflict in Atlantica could have been avoided. Our next stop, Halloweentown, is easily one of the most creative and interesting worlds in the game, and in its dedication to recreating Tim Burton's fantastic original aesthetic, ends up completely reskinning Sora, Donald, and Goofy in the Heartless to mesh everything together cleanly. This is easily the world where the developers' love for the source material is most apparent, and there was a lot of genuine fun to be found in exploring Halloweentown in this fully realized 3D space, where every single iconic location from the original film has been lovingly recreated. Despite the strength of the world's aesthetic and design, though, the story in Halloweentown is thematically inconsequential to the rest of the game, though it's still overall one of the better told stories. Jack Skellington is trying to use the Heartless to improve his next Halloween, but his fake Heartless don't have anywhere near the frightening power of the real thing, so he tries to make an artificial heart to gain control of them. Sora helps him and Dr. Finkelstein collect the materials to create his artificial heart, but creating this heart unexpectedly releases real Heartless into Halloweentown Square. Before our heroes can do anything about that though, the artificial heart gets stolen by Lock, Stock, and Barrel for Oogie Boogie. After tracking him down, we find him in a craps table themed area, which, while a great theme and concept for a boss on its own, is only barely executed on, since most of the fight is just waiting to step on a button to be allowed to deal a teensy bit of damage to Oogie before being put through his grinder of death traps again. Once Oogie is defeated here, he takes control of / transforms into his giant manor, putting a clever twist on an area that has already been a lot of fun to explore, since we now must navigate a modified version of it in order to destroy all of the orbs of darkness scattered around it. This makes for a pretty challenging and fun fight, and this sequence is definitely the most memorable part of this world. When the manor is defeated though, that's it. The Heartless disappear from Halloweentown Square, and Jack just accepts that he'll have to use something other than the Heartless to make Halloweentown special. The closest Jack gets to tying into the game's themes is in his role as a foil to Oogie, who shows the danger of Jack's quest to control the Heartless, which in turn illustrates the danger of Riku's path as well. Unfortunately, none of what happened really affects Jack's character in any meaningful way, since he himself doesn't make any connection between his attempts to control the Heartless and Oogie's attempts to do the same. I will admit that Jack not having any kind of meaningful motivation behind his decisions or learning anything from his experiences is true to the spirit of The Nightmare Before Christmas, but being authentic to the source material in that way isn't exactly compelling storytelling, especially since a few more lines of dialogue could have cleared up Jack's motivation real quick. It's after these two worlds that we finally get to come back to the main story in Neverland, or more specifically, Captain Hook's ship from Peter Pan, as we don't actually get to spend any time on the islands of Neverland in this game. That is honestly no big deal though, because this world kicks ass the whole way through, starting off with Sora being confronted by Riku, who accuses him of not caring about Kairi. Kairi, it turns out, is catatonic, leaning with her head tilted over in a slump, unaware of anything that is going on around her. Riku doesn't appear to be visibly affected by this, and while his actions shortly will show otherwise, for now he accuses Sora of not actually caring about her, and then has Sora thrown into the brig.
Ah!
You don't say.
Yeah, it was definitely Kairi. I finally found her.
All right. Yep. Then let's go up and talk to her.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Okay, but first, how about getting off?
Oh, sorry.
It's a great little moment, played very well for laughs, and already shows a sign of improvement over earlier cutscenes, as its comic timing, acting, and camera work are all on point. Once they've broken out of the brig, our heroes run into Peter Pan, who is searching for Wendy. Peter also believes that there is another girl being held captive aboard the ship, and Sora surmises that this other girl must be Kairi. After fighting through some Heartless and exploring the lower decks of the ship, Sora locates Wendy, and she confirms that there was another girl who was being held with her up until recently, a confirmation that Kairi is still here. During all of this, we're shown cutscenes of Riku and Captain Hook reluctantly working together, and tensions between them are high now that they've realized that Wendy is not one of the princesses of heart they've been looking for. Riku doesn't care about this at all though. His focus is entirely on Kairi, and he is deeply worried about her. We see this worry manifest in anger, as Riku intercepts Sora in the captain's quarters of the ship and forces him to fight a shadow replica of himself, lashing out in his despair. This fight is tough as nails, a gameplay choice that seems meant to shine a light on the darkness swelling up inside of Riku. He's able to manifest an incredibly powerful force of darkness, and it takes everything Sora has at this point to defeat it. After defeating Dark Sora, Sora finally makes it out to the deck of the ship, where he and his friends are immediately surrounded by Heartless and made to surrender. Riku uses this opportunity to open a dark portal and escape with Kairi, leaving Hook and the Heartless to deal with Sora. Hook decides to make Sora walk the plank, but this plan backfires when Sora, thanks to some liberally applied pixie dust, discovers that he can fly, and we get an awesome fight against Hook and some airship piloting Heartless while getting to fly around the deck of Hook's ship. When this fight ends, Donald and Goofy are both visibly worried about Sora, as he was so close to finally being able to rescue Kairi, and they aren't sure how he'll handle having her taken away so suddenly.
Kairi couldn't wake up, so maybe she's really lost her.
Sora.
I still can't believe it. I really flew. Wait till I tell Kairi. I wonder if she'll believe me. Probably not.
You can bring her to Neverland sometime. Then she can try it herself.
If you believe, you can do anything, right? I'll find Kairi. I know I will.
This is a character decision I go back and forth on, because on the one hand, it's pretty endearing to see Sora keep his optimism up under the circumstances, but it also makes it feel like the events of the story aren't actually having much of an effect on him, even when they definitely should. Regardless of my feelings though, the story moves on, and the next thing we see is Sora joining Peter and Wendy in their return to the Big Ben clock tower, where Sora discovers and seals Neverland's keyhole, leaving the world safe and sound. With Neverland completed, our heroes discover a route to a new world, but before we go there, we need to step back a bit. Throughout the game, if you've been exploring the world, you'll have come across these items called torn pages, and there is a little side quest you have to do for Sid where you deliver the book these pages are from to Merlin, who helps put the pages and book back together. What book are all these pages a part of? Why, they're a part of a Winnie the Pooh book, of course, and as you collect these pages, you get to play as Sora exploring the 100-Acre Wood, meeting Pooh Bear, Piglet, and all their friends too. And oh my goodness, do I love this.
Yes, I'm Winnie the Pooh, Pooh for short. Who are you?
I'll openly admit, there's a part of me that is just blinded by my ever-present love for Winnie the Pooh, both because of how important it was to me as a child and because of how much joy it always brings me. But even with that in mind, Kingdom Hearts does such an incredible job of capturing the magic of the series that when I was writing this, it brought me to tears just thinking about how wonderful it is. Each page you find allows you to unlock another part of the 100-Acre Wood, and each page introduces a new Winnie the Pooh character as well as a minigame based on that scenario. Pooh has a minigame where you help him collect honey from a honey tree. Rabbit has a minigame where you must protect his vegetables from Tigger's bouncing. Tigger has a minigame where you must bounce along the same path he does. And the last minigame has you helping Pooh find all his friends, with the final cutscene for this area being you and the entire gang from the 100-Acre Wood together, sitting under a tree and promising to never forget each other.
Sora, where are you going?
I'm gonna go look for my friends. They're waiting for me.
Bounce back again.
I hope you find your friends.
Sora, don't forget, we shall always be here. If you'd like to visit again, that is.
I have to admit, the execution here isn't quite perfect. Most of the scenes where you interact with Pooh and his friends are lifted right out of the most famous scenes from the Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, and a lot of these scenes are forced to rely too heavily on dialogue boxes, which makes the characters feel a little less vibrant than they deserve to. But those are minor complaints about an excellent world that revels in the beautiful small moments of friendship, and does a lot to reinforce this series' ideas about friendship as a result. And Kingdom Hearts has a very mature understanding of friendship. There's almost no petty conflict in this game between people who claim to be friends, with the only exception being the single fight between Sora and Donald that, while definitely immature, is still pretty in character for the both of them, and allows us a few moments to see Sora rededicate himself to finding Riku and Kairi. This game also understands the dedication and work necessary to maintain a friendship in a way that little other media does. This is most obvious in how Sora's search for Kairi motivates him throughout the entire game, but it's also clear from how even when Riku is actively fighting against him, Sora never seems to give up on him or believe that he is no longer his friend. Even later in the game, when Riku finally turns back from darkness to help Sora, Sora doesn't question Riku's desire to help. He is just happy that his friend is finally saved from the darkness that had been consuming him, even if it took him a while to come back from it.
Don't give up! Come on, Sora! Together we can do it!
Okay.
After our sojourn to the 100-Acre Wood, we come to Hollow Bastion, one of the last worlds that you visit in the game, and damn if this game did not save the best world for last. Hollow Bastion is a massive castle with a labyrinthian interior, and the process of learning to navigate and explore every nook and cranny of this castle is an absolute delight, thanks to the incredible level design. There are also 4 new enemy Heartless introduced in this castle as well, so the entire time you're exploring this castle, you're also learning to adjust to these new types of enemies and their attack patterns, which is always ever so satisfying. The castle's visual design is also fantastic and like nothing else we've seen in the game so far. Hollow Bastion has a very unique steampunk aesthetic that borrows from the environment design found in the later Final Fantasy games, yet feels just different enough from that aesthetic to be eerie and unfamiliar. This is appropriate, as we later learn that the world was the home of the Final Fantasy characters in Traverse Town, who were driven away by the Heartless infestation brought on by Maleficent. Hollow Bastion also kicks the game's plot into high gear, which is a welcome change of pace from the slow trickle of story we've seen so far. Sora, Donald, and Goofy arrive in an icy canyon where they find Riku attempting to drive back the Beast, who is attempting to rescue Belle from the castle. After Riku takes down the Beast and taunts Sora, he wrings the Keyblade away from Sora through sheer force of will, leaving him with nothing but his old wooden sword. As Riku leaves, Donald and Goofy abandon Sora, following their orders from King Mickey to follow the wielder of the Keyblade. Beast doesn't abandon Sora, however, and Sora is forced to explore the lower levels of the castle and solve puzzles without a weapon in order to unlock the main door into the castle and follow his friends. This section is meant to instill a sense of powerlessness, but I'm not sure it manages to do so effectively. You do feel a little powerless wandering the heartless-infested halls of Hollow Bastion, and there is something thematically resonant in how Sora must rely on his new friend, Beast, after being abandoned by his old friends, but Beast is able to take out the heartless around you with such ease that you never actually end up feeling powerless, and the only thing this section really makes you aware of is how much Sora needs the Keyblade in order to be useful, which feels rather contrary to the game's themes. After getting through the main door, Sora is separated from the Beast and comes to face Riku, Donald, and Goofy. We see that Goofy has had some second thoughts about betraying one of his friends, and decides to disobey Mickey's orders in order to join Sora, with Donald following suit shortly after. And then, after Sora gives his most iconic speech in the game about his true strength being found in his friends,
I know now I don't need the Keyblade. I've got a better weapon. My heart!
Your heart? What good will that weak little thing do for you?
Although my heart may be weak, it's not alone. It's grown with each new experience, and it's found a home with all the friends I've made. I've become part of their heart just as they've become a part of mine. And if they think of me now and then, if they don't forget me, then our hearts will be one. I don't need a weapon. My friends are my power.
the Keyblade returns to him. As great as that speech is, though, it's nowhere good enough to justify Goofy and Donald's abandonment and subsequent unabandonment of Sora. The game wants to make this out to be a moment of courage and dedication on the part of Goofy and Donald, but it never felt right for them to abandon Sora in the first place, so their sudden reappearance of conscience is jarring, and they end up feeling like pretty shitty friends to Sora. Thankfully, things start to make more sense from here on out. We get a decent little boss battle against Riku, sending him fleeing to the upper floors of the castle, and once he's there, we get to see that Riku is struggling to make control of the darkness within him. It's at this point that Riku hears a familiar voice, the voice of the cloaked figure we met in the cave on Destiny Islands, who offers to help him embrace and control the darkness within.
The heart that is strong and true shall win the Keyblade.
What? You're saying my heart's weaker than his?
For that instant it was. However, you can become stronger. You showed no fear in stepping through the door to darkness. It held no terror for you. Plunge deeper into the darkness, and your heart will grow even stronger.
What should I do?
It's really quite simple. Open yourself to the darkness. That is all. Let your heart, your being, become darkness itself.
This cloaked figure is Ansem, a man we've heard praised as the kind and wise ruler of Hollow Bastion. Starting back in Agrabah, as we've sealed the keyholes for certain worlds, we've unlocked Ansem's reports, the logs of his studies of the heart of the heartless, as well as his insight into the keyholes. This is where we learn that the keyhole is what protects the heart of the world, and the heartless gaining access to a world's heart through the keyhole is how they corrupt and destroy it. With Ansem's offer to help Riku use and control the darkness, though, those reports suddenly seem to make a lot less sense, as Ansem's dark and sinister figure runs counter to the man we've learned of through his research and reputation. Before we get a chance to figure out what's going on here, though, Riku has surrendered himself over to Ansem, and in the process, gained control over a unique, dark Keyblade of his own. Getting back to Sora, he and his friends eventually make their way up to the top of the castle and encounter Maleficent, facing her in one of the best and most challenging boss fights of the game, as she attempts to hold Sora off from reaching the final keyhole. And can I just say, Suzanne Blakesley has delivered one of the game's strongest performances as Maleficent, easily capturing the charismatic dominance that made Maleficent such a compelling villain in the original Sleeping Beauty, while also not being afraid to embrace the campy and fun side of her character.
You poor, simple fools. You think you can defeat me? Me, the mistress of all evil!
She's great, is what I'm saying. And despite having to fill the shoes of the incredible Eleanor Audley, she never once feels out of place or out of depth in the role. Once we've defeated Maleficent, she escapes through a dark portal, and after following her through it, we see her encounter Riku, or as we know it to truly be,
Ansem, the Seeker of Darkness.
Riku Ansem explains to Sora and Maleficent that the new Keyblade he wields is special, as it has the power to unlock people's hearts, which he demonstrates by piercing Maleficent's heart with the tip of the blade, causing the darkness welled up inside her to come bursting free and transform her into a giant dragon. We obviously have to fight the giant dragon Maleficent, and it's a challenging and satisfying boss fight that almost feels like if a bullet hell shooter were translated into an action game, since most of the fight is spent desperately dodging Maleficent's constant barrages of fire and getting in the occasional attack whenever you can. After we've defeated Maleficent for the last time, we follow Riku Ansem up to the keyhole of Hollow Bastion, where he is holding Kairi. After descending from atop the keyhole in as slow and dramatic a fashion as possible, Riku Ansem explains why Kairi is completely catatonic. She has lost her heart, and somehow, when Destiny Islands was destroyed, Kairi's heart became intertwined with Sora's, trapped inside him and unable to return to her body. Riku Ansem uses the Keyblade to tug on Kairi's heart within Sora, bringing him to his knees so that he can set Kairi's heart free. But just before Riku Ansem is about to deliver the final blow, Sora hears Kairi call out to him, and summons his Keyblade to stop the attack.
Sora! Forget it. There's no way you're taking Kairi's heart!
What follows is probably the best boss fight in the entire game. Riku Ansem is an opponent that has a lot of abilities that are very similar to Sora's, and unlike most enemies, he's very good at predicting and dodging Sora's attacks, making the simple act of landing an attack something that requires strategy and timing in order to pull off. There isn't another boss in this game so evenly matched against you, and pulling out a victory here was probably the most satisfying experience I had my first time through this game.
Take that!
Here it comes! The power of darkness! Surrender!
With that challenge over, Sora realizes that he cannot seal Hollow Bastion's keyhole without the power of all 7 Princesses of Heart, the last of whom we know now as Kairi. Riku Ansem made it very clear that his Keyblade was the only way to set Kairi's heart free from Sora, and as such, Sora picks up Riku's Keyblade and pierces his own heart with it. And this moment is, without question, the single strongest and most memorable moment in the entire game. I'm not kidding either. It's really difficult to oversell just how well this works. Sora's entire purpose so far has revolved around finding Kairi and Riku, as he wants nothing more than for his relationship with his friends to be restored. To have Sora then choose to sacrifice any hope of reconnecting with his friends in order to make sure that Kairi is okay, to ensure that she wakes up because her existence and safety matter most to him, it's a truly powerful display of love and sacrifice, and it brings so much more depth to Sora's character. Up until this point, the Sora that we've seen has been a fairly optimistic and precocious kid. He's loud, he's brash, and he's immature in a lot of ways. He rushes into situations to try and get what he wants without thinking his actions through. And he's also been a character who feels like he always has something to prove, from his childish competition with Riku back on Destiny Islands, to his insistence with Phil and Hercules that he's a true hero. And for all the genuine good that we see Sora do over the course of the game, there's this ever-present sense that he's going on this heroic journey in part just to prove that he can. With this sacrifice, though, Sora not only puts aside his own desires in order to save the life of someone he cares about, but also has the emotional maturity and insight to recognize that Riku was telling him the truth about Kairi's heart being intertwined with his own. Sora's sacrifice also proves to us as players, Sora will do the right thing, no matter the personal cost. It's great, and every time I watch that scene, I'm unable to stop myself from crying. Like, it's so good. It's the moment that made me fall in love with Kingdom Hearts all over again when I first replayed this game. I love it so much.
Sora? Are you really? No, he can't be. I won't let him go!
So, you have awakened at last, Princess.
With Kairi's heart set free, Hollow Bastion's keyhole is completed. Without Sora and his Keyblade though, Donald, Goofy, and Kairi are all powerless to fight against the Heartless, and even more unprepared to fight against Ansem, who shows himself in his true form and attempts to capture Kairi. This is a step too far for Riku though, and he pushes back against Ansem using his body this way, urging Kairi and her new friends to run. Despite Kairi's insistence that they not leave without Sora, Donald and Goofy are able to drag her out into the castle. But we don't follow them. Instead, we focus on a lone shadow Heartless, who looks on to them, almost knowingly. And then the game lets us control this Heartless. This lone shadow who looked towards Kairi and the others with such intent. And just like that, on an instinctual level, we get it. This is Sora. A heartless shadow Sora, but Sora nonetheless. And we once again lead Sora through the corridors of the castle in pursuit of his friends. When we reach Donald and Goofy and Kairi, we're first accosted by Donald in an odd bit of comic relief where he scolds us and treats us like a disobedient pet. It doesn't take Kairi long to recognize that this strange shadow Heartless is Sora though, and when a swarm of Heartless catches up with everyone and attacks them, Kairi immediately moves to protect him.
Sora!
Kairi, thank you.
Sora!
Sora transforms back from his Heartless form, saved by the friendship that led him to sacrifice himself in the first place. He and Kairi are finally together again, though their reunion is cut short as more Heartless appear, and they must escape their ship and return to Traverse Town. I will admit, it feels a little rushed to have Sora turn back to normal so quickly, and the game doesn't really attempt to explain what made it possible for Sora to transform back into his normal self again, but while it's not handled perfectly, it doesn't really bother me. After all, friendship is Sora's greatest power, which is about as justified an answer as this game really needs to bring back its protagonist, considering its already stated themes. After returning to Traverse Town and filling in all the Final Fantasy characters on what's happened, Sora and Kairi finally get their reunion in the waterway beneath Traverse Town. It's genuinely sweet how little their time apart seems to have affected their friendship, but they don't have much time to spend together, as Sora must return to Hollow Bastion to seal its keyhole. Kairi wants to go with him, naturally, but for some reason is okay with it when Sora just straight up tells her she'd get in his way.
I can't help?
You'd kind of be in my way.
Okay. You win.
And decides to just give him her lucky charm instead, as long as he promises that he'll return it to her. Even as the game and Sora sideline Kairi, seriously, it's kind of bizarre that the writers openly admit that they don't know how they could fit Kairi into the story's ending. This gesture of giving her lucky charm allows her to stay with him and protect him in a small way. Once we return to Hollow Bastion, Sora finds all the other Princesses of Heart have awakened and are working together to hold back the tide of darkness pouring out of the keyhole. We swiftly seal it by entering it and defeating a giant behemoth Heartless, but even with the keyhole sealed, the Princesses of Heart all sense that there is a darkness still brewing beyond Hollow Bastion, and we set out to find it at the end of the world. There's a few more optional things you can do before moving on to the end of the world though, like finishing out the Hades Cup and killing all the optional bosses like the Unknown, the Ice Titan, Kurt Ziza, and Sephiroth from Final Fantasy VII. These optional bits are all a lot of fun and genuinely challenging. The Unknown is the only boss out of these few that has any story relevance, as he was added into the final mix version of the game in order to tease out the villain for Kingdom Hearts 2, and despite having no voice, he is delightfully vague and menacing. As for the rest of the optional bosses, the Ice Titan is a test of endurance, requiring you to dodge a maelstrom of attacks and occasionally deflect some back in order to stun the Titan and deal damage. Kurt Ziza is a 6-armed sword-wielding Heartless who disables your magic for certain parts of the fight and tests how much damage you can do to him while he is stunned and vulnerable. And he is my favorite and so much fun. Love him. Kurt Ziza is the best. Sephiroth is Sephiroth, and in addition to having an unrealistically long sword, is nearly as good at dodging as Riku, and even deadlier than Riku at times as well. Clearing all of these bosses is incredibly satisfying, and quite rewarding, as they all unlock Ansem reports that help fill in the missing details of how he fell to darkness, and why he wants to use darkness to conquer all the worlds. In these reports, we learned that Ansem didn't just study the Heartless, but went a step further, experimenting on people in order to create more Heartless. He slowly became obsessed with trying to control the darkness, going as far to assert that a heart consumed by darkness is in its most natural state. He also developed a restlessness in Hollow Bastion after learning about the existence of other worlds, and in his frustration that he could not visit them, cast off his body and embraced the darkness. He also started to desire to bring the worlds together, and when he discovered that the darkness could consume a world if he let the Heartless into its keyhole, he started to believe that the best way for him to unite the worlds would be to have them consumed by darkness. This is all in pursuit of his ultimate goal, Kingdom Hearts, which he believes will be created when all the worlds have been consumed by darkness, a kingdom he plans to be the dark ruler of after he has united all the worlds. When we arrive at the end of the world with Sora though, we see the true results of Ansem's obsession.
Gorge, is that all that's left of the worlds taken by the Heartless?
Those worlds will be restored if we beat Ansem, right?
You betcha!
But if we do beat him, and all these worlds become restored and disconnected, what's gonna happen to this place? And to us?
This world is composed of fragments of the worlds consumed by darkness, drifting aimlessly in empty space with no signs of any life but the Heartless. It's an eerie and unsettling place, and it relies primarily on tone and atmosphere to communicate to us the harm that Ansem has wrought in his obsessive quest for darkness and Kingdom Hearts. It's also worth pointing out that by this point in the story, we can start to construct an interpretation for what darkness means in Kingdom Hearts, and it's an interpretation that will basically hold true throughout the rest of the series. We know that the Heartless are what people turn into when their heart succumbs to darkness, and at the beginning of the game, we see fairly clearly that weariness and despair can cause a person's heart to fall to darkness. We also can see from Riku specifically that his choice to use darkness requires him to accept the doubt and self-loathing culminated in him by Maleficent, as he only starts to use the darkness after we see that he has abandoned Sora's friendship and embraced the idea that Sora has replaced him with Donald and Goofy. All of this together means that we can reasonably interpret darkness as standing in for the darker side of mental illness and depression, with Maleficent choosing to prey on those self-hating thoughts in an effort to gain control of Riku. And we see that Riku finds himself stumbling deeper and deeper into the darkness as this game's story moves on. Eventually, Riku's embrace of darkness and all of the self-hating, negative emotion that drives him to fight against his best friend leads him to transform into a completely different person, someone he doesn't recognize at all.
Riku!
Don't bother. Your voice can no longer reach him where he is. His heart belongs again to darkness.
From Ansem's reports, we can also see that darkness can manifest itself in a kind of sadistic, single-minded obsession, as Ansem's desire to understand the darkness of the heart led him to conduct cruel experiments on the people of Hollow Bastion, and even kidnap people for the Heartless to feed on so that he could observe how they multiplied. In Ansem's search for answers, he never once stopped to consider the cost of his research, and the darkness in his heart grew stronger and stronger until it eventually compelled him to abandon his body entirely and embrace the darkness similar to Riku. Unlike Riku though, Ansem never had a line he was unwilling to cross, or anyone he cared about enough to give him the strength to stop himself from going over the edge, which ultimately lead him to a fatalistic worldview that he confronts Sora with.
All worlds begin in darkness, and all so end. The heart is no different. Darkness sprouts within it. It grows, consumes it. Such is its nature. In the end, every heart returns to the darkness whence it came. You see, darkness is the heart's true essence.
While Sora is obviously too much of an optimist and a good kid to help Ansem out here, Ansem's speech about the heart's inherent tendency towards darkness is actually quite compelling, and a fairly reasonable take in the age-old philosophical question of whether humans are inherently good or inherently evil. In fact, it's probably one of the most impressive things about Kingdom Hearts that it so earnestly addresses this question, as well as the fatalist philosophy that drives Ansem to be who he is. Most of Ansem's fatalism about humanity and the heart's destiny to return to the darkness from whence it was born is sold to us through Billy Zane's absolutely phenomenal, nuanced take on the character. But the world design we see is as much of a factor as the tattered, barely present remains of the worlds we've walked through and the corrupted, broken version of Destiny Islands we see now, all subtly explain to us the ultimate cost and result of Ansem's obsession and fatalism. Despite Sora's best efforts, as he offers a solid rebuttal to Ansem's claim that the heart is destined to fall into darkness,
the heart may be weak, and sometimes it may even give in. But I've learned that deep down there's a light that never goes out.
Ansem was never going to be convinced that his fatalism was wrong. What follows are 4 back-to-back boss fights that constitute the game's final boss, as we first face Ansem and his Dark Phantom, face a beefed-up Darkside Heartless from the beginning of the game alone, face Ansem and his Phantom alone, and finally, face off against Ansem as he links his body to what can only be described as a Heartless airship, taking it down section by section while freeing Donald and Goofy from its grasp. When Ansem has finally been defeated, he and Sora stand at the precipice of the door to Kingdom Hearts, and the presence of the Keyblade has made the door start to open. Ansem reaches out towards the door, expecting to be greeted by the power of darkness.
Kingdom Hearts! Fill me with the power of darkness! Supreme darkness!
You're wrong. I know now, without a doubt. Kingdom Hearts is light.
Light. But why?
Not everything is as it seems here, though. When Sora approaches the door, he peers inside of it and sees massive larval forms of the Heartless, pulsing and preparing to swarm out of the door. Sora, Donald, and Goofy all struggle to try and close the door, and are able to do so when Riku appears on the other side, now freed from Ansem's control. With the help of him and King Mickey, who appears out of nowhere wielding a golden keyblade, they are able to pull the door shut and lock away Kingdom Hearts in the realm of darkness.
Now, Sora, let's close this door for good. Don't worry, there will always be a door to the light.
With Kingdom Hearts sealed and Ansem's dark power gone, the worlds lost to darkness start to reform, and Kairi is pulled back to a fragment of Destiny Islands, allowing Sora to say goodbye to her as she is drawn back alone to her home. We then get to follow Kairi as she watches Destiny Islands reform around her, and after the credits roll, Sora, Donald, and Goofy all run off together in pursuit of Pluto, who is lost in an unknown land with them.
Huh? Huh?
Gosh, that's the king's seal.
Have you seen King Mickey? Guys, let's go!
So yeah, that's the story of Kingdom Hearts. And while we did encounter some complex themes and ideas in the story, the actual story itself is pretty simple. A young boy goes on an adventure to new worlds, motivated by a desire to find and be reunited with his lost friends, and finds himself in the middle of a conflict that only he is able to help resolve. Where the game gets the most interesting, though, is in its subtle twists and subversions of these familiar hero's journey tropes. Maleficent and the rest of the Disney villains are pretty two-dimensional and are played up for camp, but Ansem is a cleverly realized, believably motivated character, whose villainy stems primarily from his obsessive, fatalistic quest for darkness, and an isolating belief that he's better than anyone else around him. And even though he's only introduced as the villain about 2/3 of the way through the game, his appearance as a villain is only surprising because he's been built up as a benevolent ruler so far. We never feel like he's being thrown into the story out of the blue, just filled with a genuine curiosity as to how this character we've heard nothing but good things about could have fallen so far. The ending itself is also pretty subversive, mostly in its refusal to give any character but Kairi a genuinely happy ending. Sora, Donald, and Goofy are all stuck in an unfamiliar land, with no real ideas for how they're supposed to return home. Riku and Mickey are trapped behind the door to darkness, a dangerous land filled with Heartless, and also have no clear idea of how they'll return home, if returning home is even possible for them. Heck, the ending even affirms some of Ansem's beliefs, since the door to Kingdom Hearts ultimately led to the Realm of Darkness, and was not the Land of Light Sora emphatically inserted it to be. The game does an excellent job of making its story feel closed, even as all the characters are lost or in peril, and won't be able to find peace or safety until we pick up their stories again later. It's a great ending, is what I'm saying, and this ending and the final third of the game leading up to it are delivered with so much confidence that in many ways, they make up for all the weaknesses of the story beforehand. That doesn't take away from my criticisms of it, of course, but when I remember Kingdom Hearts, I don't remember its weaknesses. I remember its incredible strengths in its characters, nuanced theming and approach to philosophical questions, and its fantastic ending that still exceeds my expectation for a game with as earnestly simple a story as this. My only real outstanding complaint about this game is how the women in this game are handled, because it's not great. Alice, Jasmine, and Kairi are all turned into damsels in distress, and the other princesses of Heart are made into damsels as well, despite the regal and powerful authority they project when we do finally get to speak to most of them. There are exceptions. Maleficent gets to be the badass villain she's always been, and the story of Atlantica is very much Ariel's story and gives her a lot of agency. But even characters like Yuffie, Aerith, and the Queen of Hearts all end up coming off as underdeveloped and one-dimensional, and the closest saving grace that Yuffie is afforded is being a competent fighter in one of Olympus Coliseum's tournaments. And unfortunately, this isn't something that the series gets much better at, but we'll get into that as we get to each game. My issues here are relatively small in the grand scheme of things though, and the fact that this game's story can still bring me to tears later all this time, seriously, you try rewatching Sora sacrifice himself for Kairi without tearing up. Oh wait, you'll cry too. You'll cry. I promise. You'll cry. Is all the evidence I need to say that it genuinely works. Replaying and analyzing this game has really helped me understand just how great it is, and how much it matters to me. And it only gets better and more meaningful to me from here. Well, okay, I guess that's it. Wow, I can't believe that this thing is actually coming together. I've been working on this since, summer of 2017. I've been working on this and the rest of the essays, and it's really great just to finally feel these things start to come together. If you liked this essay, you should subscribe, like the video, share it with your friends, and if you really like this video and want to help it and other future videos happen, then I have a Patreon link in the doobly-doo. I love you guys, and here's to the next 8 of these being just as good.